Hey everyone, this is Chris Hansen with E1 Solutions. Today what we're doing is a quick video on how to connect a couple records together between Business Central and Dynamics CRM or Dynamics Customer Engagement. Specifically, we're going to be looking at if you're sending records from CRM over to BC and you need to write back a field or two, how we're able to do that. So what I'm going to walk through is with accounts and customers. Let's say the account is created in CRM. That gets sent to Business Central, but there's no account number on it. You're letting Business Central create that customer number on the fly, and you need to write that customer number back to CRM. I'm going to walk through how we set that up, how it ties together, and we're going to look at two different scenarios. One with the real-time integration, so you know you're only working with one record at a time, and another one where you might be sending multiple records. It might be a change-based map or a bulk map, and how you can tie that together. So in both cases, it's going to take multiple maps, one for each direction, one from CRM to BC and one BC back to CRM, and it's going to take a global variable and a little bit of scripting because we have to capture the data we're sending through and make sure we use that in the query that we write back. So let's walk through the simpler of the two exercises on here, and that is with the real-time integration. So I've got a bunch of integrations in this environment, but in this one we're going to be looking at the real-time integration. This is a field service specific map, but it's still pulling from CRM. It's the CRM account, same thing in field service. So it's essentially a CRM account running to a Business Central customer. I have that open over here. So again, the details of this integration is it's a real-time event. It's coming off the account. Because it's real-time, we know it's working with one record at a time because when a real-time trigger fires, it works on just that one record. The target is running to the customer inside of Business Central, so this is the first step. We're mapping the customer across, and in that mapping, we are not providing the we're not mapping through the account number, or we shouldn't be mapping through the account number. That should be taken off on there. So we're only mapping the name. That's kind of what we're keying off of on this particular one, along with the address information. Now, the part that we add in here, the part that's going to be a little bit different, is on the restriction tab. Normally, the restriction in an integration lets you filter out data at a record by record level. The other thing we can do with the restriction is we can go ahead and set global variables in there. You could also do this at the document level if you wanted for the scripting, but in this case, I'm using a global variable called global new value, and I'll show you where this gets set up. And all we're doing is we're recording the name of the account that's going through. So on the left-hand side, I've got all of my source fields I'm pulling from CRM, so there's quite a few. I'm going to be focusing on the name, and that's what I'm going to be keying off of when I pull that data back out of Business Central. So in this quick demo, I'm assuming the name is going to be unique. If name is not guaranteed to be unique, you likely need to use a different field when you're sending it through. Again, remember, we can't go off the account number because we're assuming that's not populated yet, so we have to use name. Or you could actually use the account ID if you wanted. That would require that you have a field to send that account ID to on the Business Central side. But anything that you can treat as unique and that has a spot to be stored on the BC side of this, that's the field you should use on here. So I'm using the account name for simplicity's sake on this, but essentially what I'm doing is, since it's a real-time integration, it's going to pick up the record that was created or updated. It's going to send that through. I've got my fields mapped, and I'm setting the name of that field through to the global variable, and I called it global new value, and then we return true on the restriction. Now, I'll pause looking at this integration here because I'm going to flip back to the other tab and actually take a look at the global variables in SmartConnect. So if you haven't used them, they are set up under the Maintenance tab in Global Variable, and you're going to see my global new value is listed in here. So all you need to do is go ahead and say create new global variable, call it global new value, and we make sure that that is set up. You can set a default value. I'm leaving a blank for these integrations because I don't want there to be anything in that before the integration picks that up. So that's where we create the global variable. Why that's useful is because then when we set it, like in that restriction, and that value gets set, we're able to use that later on if we need to. So we're setting it there. Additionally, if I look at my variables tab on this integration, don't want to skip this step, we want to make sure that this variable shows up when you're using it. it should get added in automatically. You use it in the script. If it doesn't, you can come in here and manually add it. That just ensures that the variable is tied to that integration. We know that it references that. The variable can be added to other integrations as well, and it's not going to interfere with anything. Each map gets its own instance of that variable, but this ensures that the reference is there when the integration is running. So the variable is added on. On the integration itself, we've got a script that's saying this is being set to there. So the final thing is running the other map back. So on the task portion of this, we're looking at the integration success level on here. We want to say, all right, when the integration is complete, we'll go ahead and do the run integration from here. The key part of this is we want to check the box that says use parent variables. So in both scenarios I showed, this needs to be marked because this is what's going to pass through that global variable where we've set that value. It's going to pass it to the next map so we can make use of it there. So that's the final thing on this first map is saying, all right, check the box to say use parent variables, and that's going to ensure that that gets sent through. So with that being set, what that means then is on that second integration that we run, the one that's writing back, that map gets set up mostly like normal. So that's going to be pulling, I'll actually show it here. If you were just looking at this map, just straight up, you're not necessarily going to be able to tell, just looking at this, my account write back, that it's set up to pull just that one record. And I'll show you where we need to look to find that. But looking at the map itself, there's nothing special about this. We're actually using it as a Business Central bulk data source on here. So we'll let this load. We can go ahead and it's the bulk data source. The only thing you can tell is I actually named it. I said it's filtered by global variable, so that's going to give us the hint that we should look at that data source and see how that's set up. But the rest of this integration is very straightforward. Since we're writing back to the account, I go to the account piece on this. For my integration, I'm sending this back and doing the name and the number on here. And yeah, we want to make sure that we're grouping on the name for this because the number isn't populated yet. So when this writes back to CRM, it's going to say, all right, we're using the name to identify which record it is, and then we're passing through the number. So on the source grouping, somebody's been messing with this integration, that should be unmarked, and name should be checked instead, in my case. And the reason I do this is because name was the field I passed through in the global variable. That's what I'm treating it as being unique. Again, if you pick the account ID or a different field, that is going to be your identifier before we get the number synced up. That's the field you want to group on and make sure you map through in here along with the number. So that part is key, making sure you group on that field that you're using to identify the record in BC and then send it back to CRM to get that field to update. So the rest of this map is very straightforward. That's it. It's just your field that you're identifying and the number field being mapped. The extra work that we did actually goes into that data source. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that data source to show what's going on there. So if I go to my bulk data source and go to my query, on here I should have a filtered by global variable. That's the one used in that integration. So if I open it up, this is pulling from my customer card list. So I'm going to my correct BC company. I've got my customer card. But then for my OData filter, I've got name equals and then global new value. So what this means is when we run this integration, when we run that parent integration or when it triggers automatically, it's a real-time integration, right? We set that restriction. In that restriction, we set global new variable equal to the name of the record that real-time map is passing through. Then we call the map that runs from BC back to CRM. And that BC to CRM map is using this source. So when it queries this and we have that checkbox marked to say pass through the parent global variables, passes through this value, second map spins up, it runs, it replaces this variable with what we've put in for that value, and then it allows it to run through and query just that one record that we're looking for when it sends it that way. So that's kind of how we do that callback map on there. That's assuming one record, which is assuming that the first map that runs is a real-time integration, right? So we know we're dealing with just one record. We're able to swap that in here and make sure that works correctly. Now, There's a lot of talking to set up. Might sound kind of confusing. Once you do it, and if you walk through it on here, it's actually fairly straightforward. You know you're working with the one record. You'll know where you're going to have to replace it on the query. The important part is just making sure the grouping is right on the maps. The one that's a bit more tricky is if you're doing a map that could pull multiple records in at once. So we'll take a look at that scenario now. So if you're working with real time, I want to see how it's done. This is all you need. If you're doing an integration that might have multiple records, we'll take a look at the next step because it's very similar to it. It's just the script that records the global variable gets a little bit more advanced on there. So what I've done for my other integration is create another global variable. I called this one account filter. So it's important to kind of name them based on the data that you're storing and holding. So we're going to call this one global account filter and run through with this variable in the maps. So let's take a look at our integrations. What I've done here is I've got an account map that's going to pick up multiple records. I've got a CRM account to customer. I'm going to modify that and take a look at it. Again, the idea is mostly the same. You've got the account name, you've got a few other fields, but you don't have the account number, right? We want to write that back to CRM. So this is going to display how that ends up working. Now, the accounts in question are going to be these three on here in my CRM, and we're actually going to run this map through. I can run this in bulk and actually show this working here. So I want to make sure those are the three. They don't have an account number on them yet. I haven't filled in any other information either, so really we're just sending the name over for this one, but it's enough to get the point across. When I look at lists, again, CRM, 2BC, this one's a bulk source, could be bulk or change. We'll talk about how many records this can handle in a little bit. You don't want to send thousands of records through because we have to append that to the OData filter. If we're sending a bulk, like a massive amount of records, this callback thing isn't going to work. You're going to want to have two separate maps and then run them independently. Otherwise, we're going to overload the OData filter on there. There is a limit that Microsoft has put on to how long you can make that URL. But if you're working with a handful of them, or if you're working on like a scheduled integration where you're not quite sure how many are going through at once, this is something that's going to work fine. Target, once again, is going to Business Central. We're going to the customer card. All that stays the same. Again, when we look at the field integration here, I've only got the name map. There's no number going through or anything. That's what we're writing back. But now when we look at the restriction, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So I'll leave it on the screen for a little bit as we go through. So once again, let's just take out pieces of this. I'm working with the name field. That's what I'm uniquely identifying it as. If that can't be your unique identifier, use your account ID, use another field that you know would be unique that's being stored on Business Central and key off of that field instead. This global account filter, that's my global variable I said I was making. And now the rest of this is set up to make sure we can handle more than one record at a time. I'm also changing it a bit in terms of how we're going to do the data source. So bear with me as I flip around a little bit and go look at our bulk data sources for Business Central again. So the first one I showed is filtered by global variable, and all that I had in here, it was the value of that field. So that value of that name field on that first example I gave is what I was replacing in here. When I look at the filtered by, or the multiple filters or multiple records one, this is the one I set up for this example. What I'm doing is I'm essentially writing the entire OData filter and I'm storing it in that variable. So when I get to the data source, all I need to do is drop that in here in place. The reason I'm doing it that way is because with multiple records, you're going to have multiple values for your name field or multiple values for whatever field you're using as your identifier. Doing it this way puts all the work on the scripting side. If I get that script correct, all I need to do is swap that out fully in here, and I've got that full OData filter in place for me. So that's why the script looks a little longer when I'm doing it on here, is because I'm actually writing out the name equals and then the source field portion of it. So that's what this is doing. So let's walk through it on here. So very first thing I do is I check to see if my global variable has any data in it. If it doesn't have data, I'm assuming that's the first record for this integration run, right? So it hasn't been populated yet. If it's the first record, then I need to go ahead and start building the OData filter as if it was the start of that. So I set it to name equals, and then I do, if you're looking in here, there are little single quotes inside of there, because when you look at the OData filter, you need to have the single quotes around the string you're dropping them. So name equals single quote, and then my source column that actually has my name, and then I close it with another single quote, and that would be what runs for the first record of the integration. For any subsequent records that are running through, it's going to look at this filter up in here and say, hey, is global variable empty? No, it's not. So it's going to drop down to the else statement, where we assume that this might be record 2, it might be record 4, record 10, etc. So we're appending to the global variable that we already have. So the very first thing we do is we say, all right, we set that global variable equal to itself, and then we append onto it. So it changes that statement slightly because it's no longer the beginning of the OData filter, we're somewhere in the middle. So we have to go ahead and say or, and then the rest of our statement here where we say or, and then name equals, and then this part matches what we had up there where we build that out. So when we're done, let's say we had 3 records, so it'd be name equals this, or name equals this, or name equals this after it's finished running. So our global variable gets a little bit larger when we plug everything in there, but it contains that full filter for us. So this is the main change to the 2 scenarios. If you get the script written out correctly, from that point on, the rest of it stays the same. You do a task to go ahead and run that integration on that integration success level. So the post map task on here, so we're doing the integration post task. We don't allow people to run integrations at the document level just because it's a very easy way to explode a map and bring down a server instance in .com. So we only let you chain integrations together at the post integration level, which is why we have to combine everything in that script we were writing there. Additionally on here, I said use parent variables. I did check the box to show a new tab because when I run this manually, we're going to see this run through. You should see the same amount of records for each, and it's going to update that data. The last thing on the script level is I added this in just for safety precaution. You don't have to do this, but it's good form if you want. So at the very beginning of the map, I go ahead and just clear out that global variable just in case there was something stored in it from earlier that I didn't want from a different map run. We can go ahead and clear that out. Now, quick point here that I didn't talk about on the first map is if you want to kind of debug this and see what your script is doing on that restriction level, on the variables tab, you can open this up and you can actually check this box to say persist run value. And what this is going to do is after you run this map for a time, when you open this back up and look at the map again, it's going to have that value stored in there for you to look at. So this can be useful on integrations that do need to persist values. We don't want it persisted when this map is live, so I'm going to leave this unmarked because we want a fresh set of filters every time we run it. But while you're debugging, if you're not sure what you're passing to that second map, you can check this before you tie the 2 maps together, run it once, see what it puts in here, and see if your syntax is right and you've got your OData filter the way you would expect it to look. So I'm going to leave that unmarked on here. If you do have this marked and it populates value in here, you can either manually clear this out after you look at it, or you can click reload value, which is going to grab it from that global variable setup where my default value happens to be blank, and it would clear it out again. But that's a easy way to look at it while you're debugging. Again, don't leave that on for the full map run because we don't want it to be there. Yeah. So I'm going to run this. I'm not going to go step through the maps again. I showed you the data source again for the second map. The filter just gets this variable replaced in here fully, and then that becomes the data source for the second map where we tie the two together on there. But if I go ahead and run this, we're not going to save. We didn't make any changes on there. I should get 3 records for my first map for my bulk source going CRM to Business Central, or I will get 1. And it sent through 1 on there. It's only 1 because I changed some names, so I don't have 3. I've only got 1, but my second map sent just that 1 back. So let's go adjust this map to actually run through a few more. I'm going to make sure my records all match on there. But good test. You can tell I'm doing it live for this recorded video. The only one that went through is the Stooges. These other ones did not, because I don't believe the names were picked up where I was filtering it down to these 3 to run through. So let's change that data source quick, and we'll do that as a test. We'll run through the 3 again, or we'll run through the other 2. We'll change this out. We'll take the Stooges out of our query, but we'll run Simpsons and Addams Family and make sure it works with multiple records. So I'm going to go ahead and validate this. This should be my query for the first map, so I was limiting it to just a handful of bulk ones here. So I had Addams Family typed wrong, so let's redo that. And the other one, what was the other one that didn't work? The Simpsons. So on here we will do the Simpsons for my other criteria. Can't see it, but you'll just have to trust me, those are both in there. If I preview it, I should get 2 lines of data now, which I do. Simpsons and Addams Family over here on the side. We'll save that. And we will save that. And we will go back and run that integration for a final test. Make sure we get 2 records this time, 2 sent back, and make sure those account numbers get updated. This is my bulk one that should pick up a couple records now. Now we get the 2. 1 for 2. Look over here. Our filter went and did 2 and 2. When I go ahead and refresh my accounts, got 760, 740, and 750 were the 3 that were created. To make sure those match here, let's look at the data that came through. We need to refresh just this page, but I'm going to refresh everything. And those should match the 3 that came through, and those account numbers should all match here. 740, 750, and 760 for Stooges, Addams Family, and Simpsons. Those match that in a slightly different order depending on how they're listed here, but those are the 3. So my short video turned into a little bit of a longer one, but I wanted to walk through what it looks like building your real-time or a map that might have multiple records, sending to BC, needing to write something back and filtering that data down. So I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to the team. You can reach out to me. Our support team, sales, will make sure that you get directed to the correct people that can help you out. So thank you all for anyone that watched this. Hope your day is going great.